At Thanksgiving dinner, my husband slapped me in front of his whole family. Then my 9-year-old daughter calmly said, "I recorded everything and sent it to Grandpa Jim." I watched him turn white as the blood drained from his face, and I knew everything was about to change. My name is Amanda, and for 7 years, I'd been playing the role of the grateful wife who accepted scraps of respect from people who saw me as Marcus's burden. What none of them knew was that beneath their dismissive comments about my lack of ambition and unrealistic dreams, I wasn't just some housewife with fantasies. I was a registered nurse who'd put my career on hold with a bachelor's degree in nursing and 3 years of trauma unit experience before Lucy was born. More importantly, my father wasn't just some distant grandfather they occasionally tolerated. He was Colonel James Mitchell, retired Army Rangers with 30 years of military experience in handling exactly these kinds of situations. But it was Lucy who'd been the true strategist all along. While I'd been enduring their psychological warfare in silence, my brilliant daughter had been documenting everything with the systematic precision of a federal investigator. Her third-grade teacher, Mrs. Stanley, had introduced a family dynamic study project that Lucy had transformed into comprehensive evidence gathering. Audio recordings, detailed journals, photographic evidence of bruises, and most crucially, a secure communication channel with her grandfather, who had very specific opinions about men who hurt his family. Let me take you back to how we got to this moment. It started 3 months earlier when Lucy came home from school with that manila folder, explaining Mrs. Stanley's assignment about observing family communication patterns. What seemed like innocent homework became Lucy's systematic documentation of Marcus's escalating abuse. She'd been recording his verbal assaults, photographing bruises he left on my arms, and maintaining detailed logs of every incident with timestamps and context. The psychological warfare had been building for months. Marcus's family treated our home like their personal entertainment venue, with his mother, Patricia, constantly comparing me to other wives who were more supportive of their husbands' careers. His sister, Monica, specialized in backhanded compliments about my appearance and parenting. His father, Robert, treated me like hired help, and Uncle Pete filled our house with cigar smoke despite Lucy's asthma, dismissing my protests as nagging. They'd systematically destroyed my confidence, making my nursing career aspirations sound like selfish fantasies. "At your age?" Patricia would laugh. "Nursing school is so demanding. All those young girls with their energy and advantages. Wouldn't your time be better spent focusing on what you have here?" But what they didn't know was that Lucy had been calling her grandfather regularly, asking hypothetical questions about what someone should do if a family member was being hurt. My father, with his military background, had immediately recognized the pattern and had been coaching Lucy on evidence collection and documentation procedures. The moment Marcus struck me in front of his assembled family members, Patricia, Monica, Uncle Pete, and Robert, Lucy's plan executed flawlessly. She'd already uploaded weeks of recorded abuse to cloud storage, sent copies to multiple email accounts, and established a direct line to my father, who was, according to her whispered revelation, already driving here from Pennsylvania with backup. Marcus's family sat frozen as Lucy explained her documentation system with 9-year-old matter-of-factness. "I have recordings of Daddy calling Mama stupid, worthless, and a waste of space. I have him threatening to take me away from her if she didn't learn to behave. I have him grabbing her hard enough to leave bruises. Mrs. Stanley says those aren't disagreements. She says those are crimes." The word crimes hit their Thanksgiving table like a physical blow. Robert immediately started calculating the financial and reputational damage to the family business. Patricia's superior smile vanished as she realized her son's documented abuse could destroy their carefully maintained social standing. Monica and Uncle Pete began frantically trying to distance themselves from what they suddenly understood was a legal liability, not just family drama. Marcus lunged toward Lucy, but she'd positioned herself strategically near the kitchen exit. "The recordings are already uploaded to the cloud, Daddy." Grandpa Jim has copies, Mrs. Stanley has copies, and I sent them to myself at 3 different email addresses. Even if you broke my tablet, they'd still exist. That's when the doorbell rang, and Lucy smiled for the first time all day. That's probably Grandpa Jim now. Through the front window, I could see my father's unmistakable military bearing approaching our door, flanked by 2 other men whose posture screamed retired military police. Marcus had never met my father, had always found excuses to avoid family visits, but he was about to discover that Colonel James Mitchell had very specific methods for handling domestic abuse situations. My father filled the doorway like contained thunder, his voice gentle when addressing me, but turning to steel when he fixed his attention on Marcus. "Amanda, sweetheart. Lucy called and said you might need some assistance with a family discussion. I've heard the recordings. All of them." Marcus tried to assert authority in his own house, but my father shut that down with quiet certainty. "These are my daughter and granddaughter. Gentlemen," he addressed his companions, "I think this conversation requires some privacy. Backyard?" What followed was 20 minutes of discussion that left Marcus returning to the dining room looking like he'd been through a washing machine, grass stains on his shirt, and walking with the careful gait of someone who'd recently learned hard lessons about physics. My father and his friends followed, looking perfectly composed, except for Dad's slightly scuffed knuckles. Marcus, now trembling, was handed a manila folder containing divorce papers with terms that weren't negotiable. The house transferred to my name, free and clear. Full custody of Lucy with supervised visitation only after court-mandated counseling. Monthly support payments of $4,000 until Lucy turned 18. A $25,000 annual contribution to Lucy's college fund. Complete forfeiture of any claim to retirement accounts, savings, or other assets. And an understanding that any violation would result in consequences my father preferred not to specify in writing. When Marcus asked for a pen to sign the papers, Lucy handed him a purple crayon from her school supplies with perfect innocence. "Use this, Daddy. It's the same color as my dress." The immediate aftermath was swift and decisive. Patricia tried to argue that this was all a misunderstanding, that families have disagreements, but my father's companions had legal backgrounds and explained exactly how domestic violence charges would proceed if the family preferred that route. Robert calculated that fighting the divorce would cost more in legal fees and reputation damage than accepting the terms. Monica and Uncle Pete realized they'd been accessories to abuse and wanted distance from potential legal consequences. Marcus's family scattered like roaches when lights come on. Patricia suddenly developed health problems, requiring her to move to Florida. Monica remarried and relocated to California, desperate to distance herself from the family name. Robert's insurance business never recovered from the reputational damage when word spread about his son's documented abuse. Uncle Pete died of a heart attack within the year, his drinking having accelerated after the scandal. 6 months later, I was sitting in our kitchen, now truly ours, reviewing acceptance letters from 3 different nursing programs. Lucy had researched clinical rotation programs with the same methodical attention she'd given to documenting our abuse, concluding that Metropolitan Community College offered the best hospital partnerships for my career advancement. The transformation had been remarkable. Our house felt completely different without Marcus's oppressive presence. Colors seemed brighter. Conversations flowed freely, and Lucy had blossomed from a hyper-vigilant child constantly watching doorways into a confident young person who no longer flinched at raised voices. My father had stayed 2 weeks after Thanksgiving, ensuring our transition and making certain Marcus understood the permanence of the new arrangements. He'd connected us with excellent legal representation, helped install a comprehensive security system, and made it clear to everyone in town that his daughter and granddaughter were under his protection. Using the generous divorce settlement, I completed my nursing prerequisites while working part-time at a local clinic. The $4,000 monthly support payments combined with my part-time income meant we could live comfortably while I focused on my education. I'd surprised myself by earning A's in anatomy, chemistry, and psychology, discovering that my mind was sharper than 7 years of psychological abuse had led me to believe. Marcus fulfilled his legal obligations for exactly 18 months before violating the restraining order. He'd been drinking, showed up at the hospital where I was doing clinical rotations, and made the mistake of confronting me in front of security cameras. My father's friends ensured he understood that his second chance had been his last chance. He served 2 years in prison and moved to another state after release, his support payments now administered through a court account. The financial impact on Marcus had been devastating. Beyond the $4,000 monthly payments and $25,000 annual college contributions, he'd lost the house, his retirement savings, and his reputation in our small town. His construction business collapsed when clients learned about the domestic violence conviction, and he'd been forced to start over in a different state with nothing. 3 years after that Thanksgiving dinner, I sat in my graduation cap and gown watching Lucy beam with pride as I crossed the stage to receive my nursing degree. At 12, she'd grown into a poised young woman who carried herself with the confidence of someone who knows she can handle whatever life throws at her. Lucy had become something of a legend in child advocacy circles, the 9-year-old who'd outsmarted a room full of abusive adults and created a blueprint for other children in similar situations. Schools invited her to train teachers on recognizing domestic violence signs, and she spoke with the authority of someone who'd lived through the unthinkable and emerged stronger. She'd announced her career plans with typical precision. "I want to be a prosecutor, specifically handling domestic violence cases." At 12, she was already volunteering with the county attorney's office, helping them understand how to interview child witnesses and collect digital evidence. The wooden box where she'd once stored evidence now held different treasures: academic awards, photos from visits with Grandpa Jim, and letters from other children who'd reached out after hearing her speak. But she still maintained those original recordings in multiple secure locations, just in case, and because. Other kids need to know that documentation works, that adults will listen if you have proof. Mrs. Stanley, now retired, visited regularly for tea and updates. She took quiet pride in how her family dynamics assignment had provided the framework for our liberation, though she was careful not to take credit for Lucy's remarkable courage and strategic thinking. "Some children are born with an innate sense of justice," she told me. "Lucy just needed the tools to act on it." I'd found my calling in pediatric emergency care, working with families navigating their darkest moments. My trauma unit experience from before Lucy was born, combined with my personal understanding of abuse dynamics, made me uniquely qualified to help other families. I saw Lucy's influence in every case I handled, her voice in every safety plan I helped create. My salary as a registered nurse, $65,000 annually, combined with Marcus's ongoing support payments, had given us financial security I'd never experienced during our marriage. We weren't wealthy, but we were stable, independent, and building toward Lucy's college fund that would give her every opportunity Marcus had tried to deny me. We weren't the same people we'd been that Thanksgiving morning when everything changed. We were stronger, wiser, and utterly unashamed of the journey that brought us here. Sometimes Lucy still pulled out her tablet and pretended to record conversations, but now it was a game, a reminder of how far we'd come. The little girl who'd once documented abuse to save her family was now a young woman documenting success, joy, and infinite possibility that opens up when you refuse to accept that suffering is your only option. My father visited regularly, no longer worried but immensely proud. Proud of the nurse who specialized in trauma care, the mother who'd raised a daughter capable of changing the world, the woman who'd transformed victimization into purpose. "You know," Lucy said to me recently as we reviewed college brochures for her early admission program, "I used to be angry that Daddy put us through all that." She considered the question with her characteristic thoughtfulness. Now, I think maybe it was necessary, not because we deserved it, but because surviving it made us who we are, and who we are helps other people. That's my daughter's legacy. Not just her own escape from an impossible situation, but her commitment to ensuring other children don't have to endure what she endured. She'd turned her childhood trauma into a superpower, her survival skills into advocacy tools. We survived. We thrived. And we're making sure others can do the same. That's how this story ends. Not with revenge, but with transformation. Not with bitterness, but with purpose. Not with silence, but with the knowledge that sometimes the smallest voice in the room can change everything.